Well, you couldn't get much more banal subject matter than this. So let's have a look at the original colour file. And I would suggest this is even less interesting. You probably see green first of all, so that would prove that the colour is potentially getting in the way of the other design elements. And you notice that the grasses are all, even though there's variation in them, they're pretty much identical in their brightness. There's not too much difference. So the image is relatively flat because of that. But by moving into black and white, I was able to play with the relative brightness of individual colours in the grass. So rendering some lighter and some darker, and that increase in contrast emphasised the textural elements in the grasses. And I'd argue now that we're seeing the lines in the wire in the fencing, and also the circular shapes in the wire as well. So I would say that the design is much stronger, and therefore the photo is much stronger in the black and white rendering than what we see in this rather flat colour image. So again, the notion of making something from nothing. So, the approach becomes more and more personal as you work through these problems while you're out there photographing. And of course, that's then continued in the editing and processing of the photographs on the desktop. So, my decision after the first initial 10 minutes, I suppose, was that I needed to concentrate on design. It was already coming out intuitively in my photographs, and it was just I only needed to take a moment to recognize that fact and really make a decision that from then on, as I moved up the hill and towards the back of Port Stanley, that I needed to concentrate more on design. And so design, includes color, tone and texture, shape and line, rhythm, balance and repetition. But colour is such a strong design element that it often gets in the way of the others. So if I see an image has inherently strong tone, texture, shape, line, repetition, etc., well then I may well decide to take the colour out of the photograph because it risks getting in the way of those other design elements. So that's, largely my approach when I make black and white photographs. That's what I base my decision on largely. In this case, I think it's a strong design image, but the colour it's probably still the first thing you see, but it's worthy of holding on to in this image because the green is particularly vibrant, and yet it doesn't completely submerge the design elements that we see, which would be the line of the fence posts, the repetition of the fence posts, the balance, that is, the spaces between the fence posts, the fact that they're all the same size, and there are similar things happening in the individual bits of glass and the window frame itself. So I felt this one was okay to hold on to in colour. Making something from nothing and dealing with otherwise banal subject matter. What is the subject matter of this photograph? To most people it would be, well, it's a barrel and there are some sheds, some being cylindrical in shape and others being square or rectangular. And it's a shot of someone's backyard. That's what most people would say if they even spent more than a few seconds on the photograph to actually think those things. But from my point of view, the image again is really about the design. It's about the shapes in the image. It's about the textures in particular, and of course the tonality, the difference between light and dark. So that's why I went for the black and white recording. So the subject matter again is actually not a barrel, not some sheds, and not a backyard. The subject matter is the design. And it's very important because if you want to use the word composition, once you understand what your subject matter is, you position yourself and you choose a particular focal length to emphasize that design. So in this case, we've still got our sheds, the cylindrical sheds, the rectangular roof in the background, the two rectangular doors which when closed form one square shape. So it's still got pretty strong design elements, but I would include the colour as a design element in this image again, which I think is complementary to the dominant shapes in the photograph, and in fact some would say lack of colour in the sheds is ideal because it really sets the colour in the door, grass and roof. It sets those colours off. So it's kind of a negative positive thing happening in this image, and interestingly probably half of the image is seemingly without colour whilst the other half has colour. And amongst the colour area you'll see green and red being dominant, and you'll see a kind of red, that sort of orange earthy colour in the grass. It's the soil, and you'll also see it on some of the rusted areas, the bolts holding the door in place. So things are referred to in different parts of images. So the personal approach continues. The concentration on design. Is colour the dominant design element in the photograph? If it is, go for colour, absolutely. So colour can be dominant, it can be equal, which is how I saw it in the last photograph, or it can be submissive. Remember, if colour's getting in the way of design elements that would otherwise really be the subject matter of your photograph, consider eliminating the colour from the photograph by making it a black and white. If you are working with colour, I think it's a good tip to try to limit yourself to 3 colours. That is, no more than 3 colours within your frame. If there's any more than 3 colours, it can be a little bit confusing for the viewer, and the image will actually often lose impact. So a good one to remember. Gee, I just thought of this. If you were looking at, flags from around the world, country flags, plenty of them we can think of that have 3 colours. And interestingly, one of them is usually white because it makes the others stronger. But gee, I reckon there'd be very few flags that would have 4 colours or more. That's one we're thinking about. So this image has a few more colours than 3, and that's why it probably doesn't have the impact that it could have. But nevertheless, the setting itself, the subject matter, it does produce a nice quiet image, which I think is appropriate. So this is the local Catholic church in town. There were 2 churches, a Catholic one and a larger Anglican church. Notice the windows on the left and right side of the image. Rather than stained glass, they've got this weird kind of coloured wash painted over them, which I thought was just fantastic. So, I explored the church, as respectfully as I could. I would like to have moved up closer on this statue, but just didn't feel comfortable doing so. I was brought up a Catholic, so I have some understanding of Catholicism and Christianity. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I have a affinity with statues and religious iconography in general. And often when I photograph religious statues, I find that, well, in fact, any statue, I find that I'm often coming in as close as I can and really just photographing a portion of the statue, the face, the hands, the expression, the gesture. So what I'm really doing is looking for the human elements, the human condition that's explored in the best constructed statues. This is a more straightforward identity photograph, I suppose. A closer-up shot of one of the windows. So again, I just thought they were beautiful. And interestingly, there's basically three colours there, aren't there? Okay, detail shot. So, how to photograph something, any sort of architecture, any sort of landscape. We could consider doing the general overview shot where you're standing back, often with a wide-angle lens, fitting in a lot of information, and then it's worthwhile moving in close and picking out individual areas, individual details within the larger scene. So in this case, the altar and the image there of Jesus and the lambs, and the obvious metaphor is Jesus is a shepherd and we are the flock, that he tends to. Okay, outside of the church and back down towards the water, there was this interesting, very small monument which was exploring the retaking of the Falkland Islands by the English Special Forces, by the troops. And, it was a very straightforward monument, but, it was quite expressive, and with those the reefs down on the bottom, just recently placed there, it was certainly worthwhile spending a moment there contemplating the actions of only a few decades ago and the consequences of that. I photographed these guys on a soccer field, or football as it's more commonly known around the world. Football, of course, is a huge part of English culture, as it is, interestingly, of Argentinian culture. But I think my thinking here was, in making this picture, it was really to set the scene, to tell the story that the English have made a commitment to the Falkland Islands after that conflict. It looked like quite a significant school, actually, that I had seen on the hill, and then turned around to notice these guys playing football. So the government has made a commitment to the place. I understand the population has risen since the conflict. There's been some new settlement there. That the economy is a lot stronger now with the cruise ships coming through. There's a fairly strong military presence. There was at least one jet that flew overhead, while I was on the island. So, the English have planted and are waving the flag. And, another great symbol of English culture, I suppose, is the pub. And I loved this one with the telephone box in the foreground. Always reminds me of a TARDIS from Doctor Who. So the way I approached this was, again, black and white, because I wanted to concentrate on the shapes and textures within the image, and line. So if you work your way from the bottom left-hand corner, there's a diagonal line, a dark line, which leads you to the telephone box. And if you then follow the telephone box, you'll wind your way, again, via line along the edge of the pathway up towards the hotel. So, I wouldn't say that the average viewer actually is conscious of these lines leading them through the image, foreground, midground, background, but believe me, it happens at a subconscious level. Once the photographer understands these tricks and techniques, which painters and drawers have been using for hundreds of years, once we start to understand these techniques, we start to incorporate them in the way we compose, or as I prefer, the way we design our images. And that helps us make much better, much more interesting images.